All right, folks, we're going to get started. Thank you, everyone joining us online. We got a couple folks making their way to their seats. Great. Oh. All right. Well, hi, everybody. Happy spring. Yeah. I hope all of your plants that you winter sowed are coming up. You got little sprouts. I know Tierney has some. Anyone else?
Oh no, I didn't winter sow.
Nice. Well, looking forward to a bunch of new beautiful plants this year. So let's get to it. Welcome. Everyone, you can hear me online okay? Give a thumbs up. Marlene, I see you. I'm gonna take that as a yeah. All right. So chapter business. Our lovely membership chair is on vacation. Can you believe it? But if you still need to renew, we can look up that information for you. How many of you were able to renew your membership with the new online service? Yeah. I think we had a couple kinks, but it seems to work pretty perfect. The statewide membership chair spent a lot of time setting this up for us. So hopefully it'll be an easy process for all of us in the future. You can always submit a paper membership. We can take care of that for you if you don't want to do it online. But the new online system allows you to see like when your membership expires, and we'll have a whole bunch of cool features that will be unveiled over the next some amount of time. So yeah. And we're really excited that our first Grand Strand sticker contest, we had some amazing art submitted by our members. Your publicity committee is behind schedule, but they have looked at them and they're so excited. So we plan to show you some awesome stickers next meeting. Definitely in time for our plant sale to help us fundraise. So just a reminder, the whole goal of the sticker contest is to raise funds for activities that we want to do, specifically to support grant projects and projects in the community that are bringing native plants to our area. So whether that's like a native garden installation, which I think there's one coming up that we'll hear more about later, to who knows what other projects people are interested in doing. So that's one of our fundraising efforts. Bless you. If you have any other ideas on how to fundraise, that's something we're looking at more seriously in our second year, so we can support those projects. So when a partner organization like, say, the Waccamaw Week planners come with us for a project proposal, we can support those. So coming soon. This is an update from Sudi about the Lisa Matthews Memorial Bay property. I don't know if any of y'all are more up to date on this than I am. All right, we'll go through it together. So unfortunately, Sudi couldn't be here, but they were able to burn the property last month. Yeah, in February. And unfortunately, the property is a little bit far away from us, so they had to borrow some volunteers and some members from the Midlands chapter, which is great. We'll share this property. Yeah. Where is it? It's like 3 hours away. Bamberg. A great property, and we'll continue to have field trips out there.
They also did longleaf pine plantings and bird boxes.
Yeah. So awesome. So this is one of the efforts that the Native Plant Society supports, is the conservation and protection of this bay and trying to restore it back to its natural state. So this is part of that process. next time when Sudi's here, next time you'll get the full download, not this the abbreviated version, but pretty neat. And then after the meeting today, if anyone's interested, we will show you how to do our tabling events. So our education committee is lots of folks are learning about the South Carolina Native Plant Society, about our chapter, and they want us to show up to their events. And we love doing that because we love recruiting members, love handing out our seed packets, love telling people about native plants. But there's only so many of us, and we'd like to have more folks who can do this tabling. It's not very hard. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be nice and don't promote invasive plants. So just make sure you're not telling people to go plant something invasive in their backyard. Yeah, so after the meeting, if you're interested in that, no commitment, you can just join us back there, kind of where Kara's sitting. We'll show you our supplies. You can ask us questions. We would be open to having suggestions from you about what we could do to improve our tabling setup if you have seen us out and about at these mini education events. So stay tuned. All right, now enough of me yabbering. It is time for our featured speaker. And this is our first remote speaker, I think. Maeve, do you want to give the little bio while I pull it up? Or I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, so we just need to let Herrick share his screen.
Okay.
Yeah, so we are so excited for this month's speaker. Dr. Herrick Brown is the director of the USC Arboretum. He's speaking to us about a timely topic, the importance of herbaria, because there have been some recent happenings in the herbarium world. And yeah, he's coming to us from Columbia because he's based on main campus at the University of South Carolina. So we're so excited. Herrick, thank you so much for talking to our group, and we're gonna let you pull up your PowerPoint whenever you're ready.
Unmute. Okay. All right. My computer is telling me to do some security stuff to share it.
Gotcha.
Uh,
I think you have permission
later.
on our end.
Okay. Trying to figure out what it's trying to tell me here. Just share screen. And that is what I want. Okay. Can you see something?
Yes,
All right.
we're seeing your PowerPoint right now.
All right. Let me go to okay. All right. So it looks right.
Yeah, looks good. Take it
Okay.
away.
Cool. All right. And if you guys need to cut me short, feel free to do so. I tend to blather on for quite a while, so I'll try to fly through this stuff and leave room for questions, and that way you'll get what you need out of it instead of all the stuff I'm going to tell you.
Sounds good.
Anyway, so herbaria. Yeah, you alluded to some news about herbaria recently, and yeah, I'm kind of the philosophy that there's no such thing as bad news, or even bad news is good news, that sort of thing. That even though there's a buzz about Duke University interested in divesting itself from its collections, it has got a lot of press, and it's educating a lot of people that otherwise would never even think about a herbarium, about what a herbarium actually is, what use what useful purposes they serve. Yeah, so there is kind of a positive spin to it. And I'll if you have questions about what's going on there, I'll be happy to answer those later. But let me focus today on what a herbarium is, and I'm going to be talking about largely the herbarium at USC in Columbia. And we are commemoratively named the A.C. Moore Herbarium, and that is in honor of the first chair of the Department of Biology at USC, and he went on to be president of the university eventually, and They actually named an elementary school and a couple of gardens and stuff after him as well. So he had quite a lot of notoriety during his time. And he was also the founder of our herbarium, which, okay, let's just hit the road here. So what I'm going to try to talk about today are what a herbarium is, how they're managed, how they're used. And then I'll talk about some of the more cutting edge types things that are coming out of herbarium collections, namely digitization, what that means, and how we facilitate research and that sort of thing, and conservation. Lots of things come out of herbaria. So sometimes it helps to define what a herbarium is not before we get into the actual definition. And some people will hear herb and that, sort of the root word there, and start thinking about herbology or medicinal uses of plants, or a greenhouse, conservatory type environment, which largely is sort of this structure that allows you to grow things in a climate that they might not otherwise survive in. Botanical gardens, obviously, are sort of these manicured spaces that often will have non-native species displayed in various ways. And we're not an arboretum. Now that's kind of close because it's still a collection of plants, but they're kind of outdoors and in sort of a natural setting. And we're certainly not an apothecary, which would be kind of like, ground up herbs and, sort of an old school term for a pharmacy. Indeed, we're not hisbarium, we're herbarium. So moving on to what a herbarium is. So essentially a herbarium is a collection of dried plants or plant parts. If the plants are small enough to fit on a standard specimen sheet, then it might be the entire plant. And in that case, it's really easy to kind of tease out, the identity of these things. In other cases, you might have specimens from a large tree, which it's nearly impossible to, I'll just say it, it's impossible to put an entire tree in a herbarium. It's too large. So what we'll do in those cases is we'll include pieces that are representative of that larger plant species. And in this case, you see a couple of hickory nuts, I think a walnut on the left there, the aggregate of follicles from a magnolia tree. And then there's actually some bark that's held together with cotton twine. And that would be from Carya ovata, which is shagbark hickory. And then the numbers on there where it says Nelson 5161, that's actually Dr. John Nelson's collection numbers. So he keeps like a running count of things that he's collected, and he's just written directly on the specimen. And that kind of preparation is not too far distant from what folks would do in a geological collection, where they'd sort of put like a little bit of white paint on a rock and then write a number on there. So anyway, in addition to having the plant material, we have a specimen label, and that has basically the identification of the species, who collected it, when they collected it, where they collected it, what else was growing with it, so on and so forth. That information serves to support a lot of the kind of research projects that you might be hearing about now on the news with regard to what's happening at Duke. Okay. So one of the analogies I make is that we're kind of like a plant morgue. Literally, our specimens are all dead, dried, and pressed flat. And if you think about that specimen label being kind of akin to a toe tag, it becomes even more apparent. And if you were to visit our facility, you would feel the chill of a cold room, because we like to keep metabolisms low. And when I talk about metabolisms, I'm talking about any of the kind of like museum pest type insects that rely on the external temperature to regulate their body temperature. And if we can keep the external temperature low, we can ensure that there's diminished activity from potential pests. Anyway, so the joke is here, you can forget your crime scene investigative shows, because we've got them, hands down, more cool stuff in the herbarium, including the victim's name and so Sarracenia flava, the yellow pitcher plant, which that's cool. You guys had that on your banner. And then family members that need to be notified. It's in the Saraceni ACE. And then you've got like a locality and forensic analysis of the scene of the crime occurring in Marion County in this case, specifically in Britton's Neck. And then a long list of potential witnesses. And these would be like the associated species that were growing near the plant when it was collected. And here I've labeled Dr. John Nelson a botanicidal maniac. And his number being, sort of a running count of victims. Okay, all right. On and on go the analogies. But, okay. And so that would make me kind of the undertaker of this thing. But no, in all seriousness, herbarium is probably more analogous to a plant library. Only the thing is like, if you think about libraries, and sometimes libraries have special collections of rare books, almost every single specimen in a herbarium is unique. And I say that even if, say, a collector collected 3 branches from an oak tree and could make 3 specimens from it, we would consider those duplicate specimens because they're part of the same collecting event. And even so, they're all unique. There's different, smaller branches off of those branches. The leaves might be facing one way on one specimen and a different way on the other. But largely the collecting event information is going to be the same, but the individual physical specimens are all entirely unique. So we serve as a sort of a storehouse for primary reference materials. So all the information that is on the specimen label and some of the physical characteristics of the specimen are the primary source. If you need to do research, you have to consult the specimen. So let's see, where was I? So we're the largest collection of these types of specimens in the state of South Carolina with 130,000 and counting. And you might wonder, how did we amass such a collection? And I'll just, as a quick aside, the Duke Herbarium numbers 825,000. So they're 8 times larger than we are. But over the years, past curators and colleagues with Department of Natural Resources, Native Plant Society members, city parks. I'm trying to think of there's a long list of folks that may have sent us specimens as part of their inquiry as to what is this plant? Can you help us identify it? Or maybe they were actually doing a floristic survey of a parcel of land like Lisa Matthews Bay, and they wanted to catalog everything that was present when they visited. So over the years, those sorts of activities have just sort of accumulated. And going back to our founding father, Dr. A.C. Moore, we keep a small sort of subset of our material attributed directly to him. And that, during his time, got up to about 367 specimens. So now we've grown quite a lot in just a little over 100 years to reach 130,000 and counting. Some of the other avenues through which we get additional material occurs through exchange with other herbaria. And so they might just send us outright gifts, and these might come from University of California, Riverside, most recently. We have some parcels that are awaiting shipment from the British Museum associated with some 19th century collections by Ferdinand Rugel. So those sorts of exchanges and gifts and other stuff help us expand the collection. And so if you look at this photograph here where I'm masked in front of a black walnut specimen, you can see there's a little bit of color coding to the folders there. And that is largely a geographic designation. So we put material that's collected naturally occurring in South Carolina into plain colored folders. And then any material that we have from other southeastern states would go into one of the orange or yellowy colored folders. Blue folders are for anything outside of the southeastern US. And so that ranges from anything from the western states to Northern Africa, Vietnam, lots of stuff from Europe through exchange programs. So we do have sort of a global representation of specimens within this collection. The process of making these things obviously involves field work, which is probably one of the funner aspects of the work. Here you can see Dr. Nelson making some pretty remote collections in the bottom right, and then just sort of a roadside stop in the middle image there. And what he'll do, or what we do in the field, is we want to get the specimens as flat as possible, as soon as possible. So we carry with us sort of a bundle of newspaper sheets, and we'll put the freshly collected material between the leaves of the newspaper. And then we just carry with us some other pieces of cardboard that are cut to about the same dimensions, which standard size sheet is 11.5 by 11.5 inches wide by 16.5 inches tall. And but for the field pressings, we don't need all that formal material. We just use newspapers and cardboard, and maybe a couple of straps or a string or a belt or something to kind of hold it all together. And then when we get back to the lab, we will put it in a formal press. And that just means kind of systematically going through, checking how the specimens look, and then placing them between not only cardboard, but a sheet of blotter paper, which is just a thick cotton rag paper that's very absorbent. And we'll just do like a layered cake. So it'll be like cardboard blotter specimen, and so on and so forth. And if we have any bulky material, we'll try to sort of absorb some of the topography of the specimen, take up some of those bumps with basically some old carpet foam. So you can kind of see in this image, there's a couple of pieces of that, and one actually stuck into the press there. Anyway, so we try to make it look nice and neat, because we got to fit it into a drying oven at this point, and we want to leave space for other collections. And then parachute straps will help cinch it down. And then it goes into this steel cabinet that has a heating element in the bottom and a little circulating fan that moves the air upward through the specimens. And so the whole goal of this is to dehydrate the specimens as quickly as possible. Because if you think about plants, one of the things that they do in terms of, like, if you self-survival really, but of course they offer all these ecosystem services. They shade, and they put out oxygen. Well, oxygen is really just a byproduct of their metabolism, right? In order to put out the oxygen, they also have to kind of take in some water and nutrients from the soil, and then they mix a little bit of sunlight in with some photoreactive pigments and split a bunch of molecules and recombine them to make what? Carbohydrates or sugars, right? And so plant bodies are essentially filled with that kind of material. And you add a little water to that, and it's a perfect growing environment for fungus and mold and those sorts of things. So that's this whole process of collecting in the field and getting it into the formal press usually transpires within a 24-hour period. Any longer than that, in our climate, your specimens will tend to start to get kind of blotches on them, and things will start to look kind of rotten and not ideal, more fit for the gallery of shame. Okay, so say you've got your specimens dried, and well, here's some other aspects of it. Of course, it involves our work involves a lot of field work, so it's fun to get out and get to see lots of pretty flowers. We've got phlox with some Christmas fern behind it there, a dayflower, and a cardinal flower. So you guys are probably familiar with these things. And from after a long day in the field, you can get quite tired. And there I am at Halloween taking a break from all the decorating. But the other cool thing is that you get to see really cool plants like this. I think they call it Indian paintbrush. It's one of the it's like one of the easternmost representatives of a Western group of plants. And so this one's kind of a remnant indicator that we used to have more prairie type environments in Western portions of the state. So you get to see cool stuff like that. And of course, we can't collect the whole tree. So this is kind of these images here are supposed to indicate how it's difficult to kind of get accurate representation of larger species on a 16.5 by 11.5 sheet of paper. So we try to collect branches and leafy material, and we also try to include, as much as possible, some sort of reproductive structure. So flowers, cones, fruits, any of those sorts of things that can help us more accurately identify what species we've got a specimen of there. Okay, so it goes through the drying process that I mentioned earlier. And then there's this process of mounting it on these sheets. Here I've got a couple of student volunteers who looks like they're going through a pile of algae specimens currently. But that kind of gives you an idea of like this, the size of the sheets, the placement of the labels, those sorts of things. And mounting the specimens on the sheets is a very, I wouldn't say scientific process, but it's not just arts and crafts. So it definitely takes some spatial cognition to work with this oddly shaped object, the specimen, and fit it onto that finite amount of space and still allow room for the informative label and any of the official markings that we have on those sheets. You can kind of see the stamps usually on the right-hand side that have our herbarium logo. Just below that is a stamped number. And we also have to apply a barcode and some other things to these specimens. So we have to, in mounting them to the sheets, you have to think about not covering all that other information up. And then we just use basically Elmer's school glue at this point. It's a polyvinyl acetate adhesive, and it's essentially archival quality. The only difference between using Elmer's glue and say something that's a $200 5-gallon bucket of like jade glue is that the formulations for making the sort of industrial standard type adhesives are very, very strict. And so the exact same amounts of the different components are always the same through there. Whereas Elmer's might have a little bit more of this, a little bit less of that. But for all intents and purposes, it works just the same, and it's much more accessible or easy to purchase. So we use some careful application of the glue to the back of the specimen, and then it is carefully placed on the sheet. We try to avoid any errant stray drips of glue so that these things are, professionally mounted, let's say. And then at that point, they're filed away in the cabinets and curated in perpetuity. Now, within our collection, the oldest specimen dates from about 1814, and it's associated with a special collection called the Henry William Ravenel Collection of Converse College. That's a long story in and of itself. But Ravenel, even though he was himself born in 1814, somehow came by the specimen through exchange with a colleague that was collected by an earlier botanist, Constantine Rafinesque. Anyway, so the point there is that, yeah, this specimen's easily 210 years old or so, and there are much older specimens in European herbaria. And sort of the comparison we can make here is the integrity of Linnaeus's headstone is barely legible at this point. So the weathered conditions that it's experienced outside have begun to show its age. Whereas specimens that Linnaeus himself collected in mid-1700s are still in excellent shape, and researchers still consult them today. So when cared for properly, these objects can last for hundreds of years. All right, and so we've managed to get all this done with a great team of volunteers and colleagues with Department of Natural Resources. Being associated with the university, we have fairly easy access to student volunteers. And I'm also able to kind of capitalize on the fact that I teach spring and fall flora class. So a lot of times I'll have students that go through that class and are interested in volunteering. Some of our older volunteers are retired from various careers, but generally have an interest in herbaria either through association with Master Gardener programs or Master Naturalist programs. And so it's basically, it's a good time. We have little celebrations every now and then to blow off steam. One of the things I struggle with personally is wondering if I'm a decent botanist, and my son, of course, he just lays it out flat for me. I'm just a plant nerd in his eyes. But I know secretly he picks up on some of the information I give him. I mentioned earlier that I teach a flora class, and so that's always a great time. And I love hearing my students say, yeah, I was walking across campus and I can't do that anymore without saying, there's that plant. So it makes me think that, it's really sinking in with the younger generation. So I try to sell that to anyone. Back to herbaria, how our data were historically accessed is a lot different from the way they are now. So you've seen the steel cabinets into which the specimens are filed. And that's kind of like dark data. Once we close the door on that, you can't really retrieve the information. And there's only so many ways you can arrange a physical collection. So our collection tends to be primarily arranged systematically. Well, let me back up a second. By that, I mean, it's arranged alphabetically by plant family. And then under plant family, it's more of a systematic arrangement following the respective genera that would fit into that family and the species within those genera. That's the primary arrangement. And then, of course, the secondary arrangement is sort of the geographic designation that we have in the folder colors. So if you wanted to say, well, I want to see all the specimens that Bruce Sorey collected from Buncombe County, North Carolina, 1967. Sorry, I could say, well, you're going to have to crawl through the herbarium and look through all of the orange folders and see if you find one collected by Bruce Sorey. And that'll take, years. So what we've been able to do in changing that around now is digitize the specimens and put them into a database. Some of the traditional uses that we were limited to with herbarium specimens would have been doing things like botanical illustration or comparative analysis, taxonomic studies. So we would scrutinize specimens that are all identified as the same species to make sure that we don't have anything misidentified. And if so, we put an annotation label on it and file it correctly. Sometimes we find that things are collected and we can't assign them to a species. We know they fit into a genus, but whatever characteristics the specimen has just don't fit the mold of any of the other species that we know. And so the specimen on the left here is probably one of the rarest plants in South Carolina, which is I think they call it the Carolina hedge nettle now. But it was first discovered in like the late 1970s or early 80s by Doug Rayner, who was a botanist with the Heritage Program at the time. And he collected it and he thought, oh, Stachys, and he got it back to the herbarium, made a specimen, but he's like, Stachys question mark, it doesn't fit anything. And Dr. Nelson, who came along a few years later, is a specialist in this genus, and he's looking at it and he's like, this is a new species. There's nothing else like it. Problem is that Doug Rayner didn't know or didn't really record exactly where he was at the time he collected it. And so the locality wasn't known and they couldn't rediscover it essentially. So it remained kind of this enigma for a number of years until somebody in the early 2000s stumbled across the population. And so they immediately contacted Dr. Nelson, and he was able to get some fresh material and do some more detailed analysis of it to characterize it as a species. And so finally, almost like 25, 30 years later, we have a new species described. And that original specimen just sat in our herbarium cabinets for decades, only identified to the genus. A really interesting story, but it kind of gives you a sense of like how difficult it is to really describe new species. And they're probably discovered all the time, but actually giving them a scientific name can be a long, drawn out process. All right. So the way we get around some of the hurdles in terms of like the types of research we can facilitate is by digitizing the collection. And again, we rely on a lot of student volunteers to help us with this. And you've got Taylor on the left and Will sticking his hands into the light box there.
Hey, Herrick, I'm sorry to
Yes.
interrupt you. We want to wrap up in about 5 minutes.
Okay, that's fine. I can zip through this. So a lot of student volunteers to digitize the collection. That involves upfront. When I say digitization, I mean capturing digital images and then entering all of the label data. And I'm sorry, by 5 minutes, did you mean it's time for questions or 5 minutes and then time for questions?
You have like 5 more minutes and then we'll do questions.
Okay. All right. So we parse that label data out. This looks kind of like that goofy one I did earlier with the crime scene investigation stuff. But this is just to kind of give you an idea what level of parsing we do. And by that, I mean, we don't just like write a paragraphical expression into the database. The different types of information go into completely different categories. And what that allows us to do is search on different aspects of it. So once we enter the entire collection in the database, it's very easy to figure out how many specimens or which species Bruce Story collected from Buncombe County, North Carolina, in, what did I say, 1967 or something. Databasing really facilitates access to that information, facilitates discovery of the information that's kind of hidden away in this treasure trove. And it has allowed us to move forward. This is kind of what it will look like if you were to search the database. And it has allowed us to move forward and share that database, not only in a regional scale, but with regional partners and into national level aggregators like iDigBio. And at the very top there, you see GBIF, which is the Global Biodiversity Information Facility. So we feed our data into that arena as well. And that gets us a lot more exposure. So there might be researchers in China, Australia, Africa, other places in the world that otherwise would have no idea that we had collections of plants from their part of the world, or species that were related in some way, we've been able to kind of up the numbers of citations that our collection is getting by providing these data in these other environments. And just real quick about some of the sort of research that digitization has allowed us to do. So you can do remote morphometrics analysis, that top image there with the 1 centimeter bar. Since our images have the scale in there, you can calibrate digital images, so you can just make measurements on the screen. The bottom image there is showing sort of a map search, so you can draw a polygon and tell me all the plants that grow within that area. We facilitated biogeographic studies looking at invasive species or rare plant species distributions. And some studies have looked at changes in flowering time based on either a latitudinal or altitudinal gradient. This is an example of one of the publications that's come out of that sort of work through, I think it was the University of Tennessee. This was my thesis, basically, or I'm sorry, my dissertation, showing how forecast climate conditions are going to be unfavorable for Loblolly Bay. Some examples of how you might see a latitudinal gradient in phenology, looking at white oak collected in Georgia versus Pennsylvania, and the various degrees to which those plants have begun to leaf out. And Hexastylus naniflora, which is a dwarf flowered heartleaf in Greenville County. This was a case where there was a property that was slated for development, and one of the things that would help secure its preservation was documenting that there were federally endangered species present on the property. And at that point in time, we really didn't know that the heartleaf was on the property, but we crawled through the USC Upstate Herbarium's database and discovered this specimen, which was collected many years prior to this property acquisition effort. And it proved that the species was there. So it made that parcel a priority for conservation. And there's more information about it. Venus flytrap, I'm sure you guys know about this one. It's right in your backyard. This was a plant that was proposed for listing by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service a few years ago. And it goes through this long administrative process of approval. Ultimately, the findings were that populations in North Carolina were in better shape than in South Carolina, and that the species as a whole was not in imminent danger of extinction. So it was not listed. But the sort of shining moment for this plant is that as part of that whole process, it got pushed through the state legislature and is now designated as a state carnivorous plant. So it affords some sort of notoriety, at least. Other projects that we've done with the herbaria involve historic collections. So this is, again, Ravenel material, his specimen, and he talks about this specific specimen in his journals that we have at Caroliniana Library. And so we had this site Plants and Planner up for a while that allowed you to kind of mine those data sets independently. And here's a picture of Ravenel on his trip to Texas. And one of the other sort of groups that we're involved with is the Mark Catesby Center, which is actually housed out of the library at USC. And we do a variety of projects that right now are pertinent to Mark Catesby, but the goal ultimately is to branch out to other South Carolina naturalists. And that's all I've got. Any questions? or time for questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Herrick. I'll just start off with not exactly a question, but you told that cool story of the rediscovery of the Carolina hedge nettle. And I just wanted to make sure everyone knew that's in our neck of the woods that grows in the Santee River Delta and the Yawkey Preserve down towards Georgetown. So that's a local endemic plant for the Grand Strand. Yeah. So any questions for Herrick? Yeah.
Do herbariums have a preference for, now that I'm thinking about it, do they take, if they adhere to a piece of paper, do they take front and back to display front and back samples on the same piece, or does that make sense?
I think so. Herrick, were you
Yeah.
able to hear the question?
I think so. I'll give a response and then you tell me if I've answered it. The herbarium sheets that you saw, all the material's only on one side. It's very fragile when it's dried. So we always support those sheets, even though it's kind of on almost a card stock, it still gets a little flimsy sometimes because it's a pretty big sheet of paper. So we always support them with a similarly sized piece of cardboard to hold them up. And then we never turn them face down, never flip them through like a book, because there's always a chance that fruits and other things might become detached, and we don't want to lose those identifying characters. You might have noticed in some of the images that we do have like a little envelope stuck on there. We call it a fragment envelope or a fragment pack. And anytime something falls off that we don't have time to immediately attach, we'll stuff in there. A lot of times at the time the specimen's being mounted, any additional material that just won't fit on the sheet goes into a fragment envelope. So basically, I think the answer to your question is, yeah, it's just one specimen.
You join
per
Ray
one side
Johnson?
of sheet.
I'm gonna too. No, okay.
Now, on occasion, if we have a very small specimen, if you can imagine something like a violet, instead of taking up that entire sheet with a small plant, we might just kind of mount one off to the side. And the idea there is that later on we can mount an additional specimen on that same sheet. But when we do that, we only do it if both specimens were collected from the same geographic area. So same county in South Carolina kind of thing would go on 2 on 1 sheet. But those are kind of special cases.
Cool. Any other questions? Yeah.
The USC Arboretum facing any sort of existential crises, or like, do you have to?
I think every herbarium in the world is facing an existential crisis. At least that would be the sense that you get from herbarium listservs and other sorts of lists that I subscribe to. It was very surprising to me that my colleagues with DNR and some of my staff members had kind of heard this buzz, because they were in communication with staff at Duke, at the Duke Herbarium at the time this was occurring. And so we got word of it before it even broke in the media. And I just couldn't believe it. I was stunned and shocked. And as soon as it was making headlines, there was a group that rallied and created some sort of petition. And I think I don't know how many signatures they've got, but I think they had a goal of like 75,000, and they're pretty close to reaching the goal. Lots of people wrote letters, and I've seen let's see, articles in the Washington Post. I know for sure. There was a piece on NPR with On Point, and I just can't believe how much press that it's been getting lately. But no, I mean, I've got assurances from my chair that we're not on the chopping block. But still, the environment as a whole for these sorts of natural history collections is always kind of coming under fire, I guess. We have to find ways of justifying our existence and making sure that we minimize our financial footprint on our parent institutions. So,
Herrick, you mentioned people can visit the Catesby Museum if they're ever in Columbia. They can access the digitization of the herbarium online. Is there anything else people can do to get involved or support the herbarium?
Well, okay, I'll tell you guys that yes, we do have an endowment that helps support student salaries and purchase of, like, the nuts and bolts, herbarium paper, those sorts of things. It's called the Wade T. Batson Endowment for the A.C. Moore Herbarium. You can find that on like a Give Now page, or if you visit www.herbarium.org, we will have links to that. Now I say that because I would certainly not refuse anybody's generous donations. But I'm also a very strong proponent of supporting your local herbarium. And I would point out that I'm not sure what area of the woods your geographic limits extend to. But closer to home, you might find Francis Marion University has a fine herbarium. And my colleagues with Department of Natural Resources have been working with Coastal Carolina, right where you guys are, because they have a herbarium that has, I think, given Dr. Lucan's relatively recent retirement, was sort of, I wouldn't say orphaned per se, but just sort of in limbo for a moment. And I think they have a professor there now that is working to get it digitized. We have a student employee who's going to help do the image capture and digitization. And so I would say, certainly, again, I'm happy to take your money, but you might have institutions closer to home where you could help volunteer. And maybe they have an endowment or something like that you could contribute to, but certainly reach out to those folks. I think Citadel might also have a collection, and further south, which might be out of your range, USC Salkehatchie has one. So there are several herbaria within the state: Newberry, Clemson, Winthrop, Coker, not Coker anymore, Converse. So there's a smattering of collections and institutions that I'm sure would be happy to have some extra help.
Awesome. Well, that is great. Thank you again to Dr. Herrick Brown. Herrick, you're welcome to stay on the Zoom if you'd like to join the rest of our meeting. Otherwise, thank you again. We really appreciate your time.
Okay, I appreciate it. I'm going to sign off. I think my dinner is waiting for me in the kitchen. So, but it was a pleasure talking to you guys, and thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye.
All right, it's time for Plant of the Month.
We still need a theme song if anybody has any ideas. I hope y'all will indulge me just for a minute. Before I do Plant of the Month, I just wanted to share my own real life experience with using herbariums. When I worked for the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, I worked with the Natural Heritage Program and the Adirondack Botanical Society to conduct a survey of the Adirondack Park for orchids. And one of the first things that we did was go to the New York State Museum and look at every single historical record for orchids in the Adirondacks, so that we had some baseline of what species to expect there and to know whether we found anything new that hadn't been recorded before. And we actually found one species that had not been recorded before. So that's a real world example. They are important and we should protect them. Coincidentally, Plant of the Month is an orchid. Many people think that orchids pretty much only hail from tropical areas. That is very far from the truth. We have over 50 species of native orchids in the state of South Carolina. And today I'm going to talk to you about Tipularia discolor, which is commonly known as the cranefly orchid. These are herbaceous wildflowers. They tend to grow in a variety of different woodland and forest types. In my observation, they tend to like mixed conifer and deciduous to deciduous forests. I've never seen them in strictly coniferous forests. I think part of the reason for that is they have a very unique ecology. They do kind of the opposite of what other plants do, where most of our herbaceous wildflowers, they go dormant in the wintertime and then they put up leaves in the summer. This plant does it the other way around. So in the winter time, the leaves actually come out when there's no leaves on the canopy. And so they gather light all winter long, and then those leaves go dormant in the spring. And then in August or so, they send up this flower spike with no leaves at the base. So that's kind of neat. There's only one other orchid locally that I know does that, and that's the putty root orchid. They're fairly common. In my observation, they're one of the most common orchids in the area in South Carolina. You can see their distribution there. Anywhere with the black square means they're native and common. Here's where I get nerdy about scientific names. Tipularia, the genus, is in reference to the tipulids, which is the scientific name for the crane flies. And the reason that it's called that is that whoever named it felt that the flowers resembled a crane fly. So that genus name describes what the flower looks like to the person who described it. And these are the leaves. Again, these would be out during the winter. They're out now, and then they will go dormant in the next month or so. And discolor actually refers to the fact that the top of the leaf is typically green and the bottom of the leaf is purple. So that discolor refers to those two different colors on the top and the bottom of the leaf. So in this particular instance, that scientific name really describes exactly what this plant is. These are the seed capsules or the fruit of the orchid. Orchids have dust-like seeds. They're extremely, extremely small, which allows them to be distributed by wind as opposed to by birds or mammals or some other fauna. Despite the fact that they look like crane flies, they're not pollinated by crane flies. They are pollinated by moths. These are 3 examples of moths that pollinate them. These are the 3 that are native to South Carolina. There's several other moths that are native to other parts of the orchid's range. And I'll just go back to the flower for a second here. But this structure on the back end here is actually a nectar spur, a super, super long nectar spur, and the nectar is all the way at the end. And so what ends up happening is the moth uncurl their proboscis and stick it into the nectar spur, and they have to like really, really, really reach, and they get the pollen stuck on their head. And then they go to the next flower and they have to do the same thing where they have to reach, and then they deposit the pollen onto the next flower. And that's it. One of our native orchids. I will certainly feature more orchids in the future because they are near and dear to my heart. But I thought I would start us off with this one. The other thing I'll mention is people often see the leaves but think that they are smilax or greenbrier leaves because they have a similar shape. They just don't turn into vines. So you may have actually seen them and not realized it. Yes. They typically like forest or woodlands that are either mixed deciduous or deciduous. Anywhere where they can have a semi-open canopy in the wintertime, they're fairly common. If you come to the far out field day on Sunday and come on my plant walks, I may or may not be able to show you the leaves. Meaning I will be able to show you them. Any other questions? Okay. Upcoming events. Who's taking over?
Okay, so our next upcoming event is an invasive species volunteer day at Myrtle Beach State Park. Unfortunately, it is canceled. It's gonna be raining and herbicides and metal tools don't play well with rain and lightning. So unfortunately, if you were signed up for this volunteer day, it's gonna be canceled. We don't have a new date yet, TBD, but we will definitely reschedule this. I think this is a really important stewardship and habitat management activity for our chapter. Myrtle Beach State Park has plenty of invasives to keep us busy, so we'll check with Ranger Ann about when we can reschedule this event. But we have plenty of other fun things coming up. Kara is going to tell us about Walk-A-Mall Week.
Ah! Okay, well, you can't go murder invasive plants then, but you can come murder invasive plants with us. So Walk-A-Mall Week starts tomorrow. We have a full week of events. Our first event is an outdoor movie night down at Hobcob Barony at Kimball Lodge. Yes, we know it's gonna rain. We're gonna move inside, but we're still gonna watch our premiere of our educational short film. It got a little longer than we thought it was supposed to. Flora the Explorer. So y'all should definitely come because I think Flora's going to be hanging around a little bit longer with the Native Plant Society. So we might be stuck with her for a while. And then we are going to watch our feature film, The Day of the Triffids. Get a little horror with our plants going on. This event we're really excited about. This is our Far Out Field Day. It's going to be on Sunday. The weather's looking good. Might be a little bit chilly, but at least it's not going to rain on us. Tierney mentioned she is going to be leading native plant walks throughout the Cox Ferry Lake recreation area. We're going to have plant walks. We're going to do some kayak trips. I think they're pretty much sold out. Pontoon trips are pretty much sold out. But we do have some birding opportunities with Dr. Chris Hill, who is here with us tonight. So you can check out the birds that also benefit from the flowers. And Maeve is going to be leading a river flow yoga, which should be really, really fun. So if you haven't signed up already, I highly recommend checking out what's left, but also just come out and join us because we're going to have lots of educational exhibitors out there talking about native plants and why they're important. And you can see cool stuff at Cox Ferry Lake. If you've never been to Cox Ferry Lake Recreation Area, you ought to go. Next Wednesday, we're going to be hosting a green drinks event. It's going to be at Bonfire in downtown Conway. Come join us, eat good food, meet cool people that like the same things that you like. It's fun. If you haven't been to green drinks, you should check it out. Who here has been to a green drinks? Raise your hands. Okay. So all these other cool people have been, and y'all have missed out. So just saying. If you want to come kill some invasive plants with us, we're going to do an invasive plant removal on Thursday. We are removing water hyacinth from the river. Water hyacinth is a nasty invasive and it's been clogging up the back channels of the river, which is not fun for anybody who likes to go out and paddle the river or just enjoy the river. So we have partnered with CCU, Outdoor Rec, and Sustain Coastal to do some invasive plant removal on Thursday. But the big event that is probably most exciting for everybody is we are installing the first native plant garden in Conway, maybe? Yeah. Our first native plant garden in Conway. We'll be doing that on Saturday, the 30th. There are still some spots open to help out with that. We would love to have people come help out. If you don't want to plant plants, you can also help us pick up trash and keep everything beautiful down at the City of Conway Marina and Riverwalk. And then if you stick around until noon, you get to see some of us jump in the river for the river jump. Also, Victoria really doesn't want to jump in the river and she only needs to raise like $200 more. So donate a little bit of money to make Victoria jump in the river. Let's do it. All of this information can be found on our on the Winyah Rivers webpage. If you need help finding it, just let me know. All the information for all the events and our other events that we have going on. And this is just in here to show you where we will be installing our native plant garden. This is the City of Conway Marina or Walk-A-Mall Outfitters. So it's going to be right here. She's a little shady, but we found that she gets more sun than we thought. Cause we were there in the afternoon and we're like, we have been lied to. She gets more sun. So, and if, oh yeah, she going down. She going down. If
Pulling us around some 4 years.
she coming out and these little hollies, so there's gonna be some invasive removal at this as well, but I think we're gonna do it the day before on a prep day.
I was hoping we'd be over on the actual river wall, because this doesn't get nearly as much traffic, but.
We're gonna draw the traffic there. We're gonna bring the people there. They have to park over there to get over to the other side. Well, they can, but who does? You park here?
Every Monday morning, I park right there.
Ha! Ha! We're gonna get people there one way or another. And Matt, who runs Waccamaw Outfitters, is super excited for this. So, Matt's gonna be promoting us as well. But yeah, say goodbye to that crepe myrtle by this time next week. All right, any questions about Waccamaw Week? Cool, come play with us. Oh, do you have a question?
Tools.
We have tools, but if you are volunteering, please bring your tools if you'd like to. And once we get this planted, we have plants for this, but I have a feeling in the future, when we lose plants, because sometimes it happens, guys, it's really sad, but it happens. We will be bugging you and say, hey, what'd you sow last winter? What do you want to put in this garden? You want to bring us something? And we'll have our own members put lovely plants in the garden. Okay.
So we have an interest at the chapter level to increase our advocacy efforts, because there's a lot of things that come up in our neck of the woods that need some passionate environmental voices, and we hope to be part of that. We have a great partner, or Coastal Conservation League. Becky, I don't know if you're still here, not to put you on the spot a little bit, but this is y'all's event.
It is, yes. Thank you, Victoria. Yeah.
Hey.
So my colleague Trapper Fowler and artist Mary Edna Fraser, she's from Charleston. If you've been to Hobcaw and seen the picture of Hobcaw or the batiks that she does a lot of silk batiks. She did a painting of Lewis Ocean Bay for us this summer of pitcher plants at Lewis Ocean Bay, of a whole river of pitcher plants. It's a gorgeous painting. If you were at Winyah Rivers Hobnob at Hobcaw, it was featured there as well. But they both will be speaking about environmental advocacy. Mary Edna, her long history of using her artwork for environmental activism, and then Trapper speaking about Lewis Ocean Bay and his background with DNR and work with Coastal Conservation League and how we advocate for environmental issues. And that is coming up at the library in Conway on the 11th at 6 o'clock in the evening. It is free and open to everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, so learn to advocate. Great. All right. And then Jason, you have an activity, yeah?
Yeah.
Do you want to speak on it?
It's gonna be not at the library, it will be when y'all auditorium.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So it's just a talk I did for Green a couple of years ago, maybe. It's more focused on, again, interconnections, but the geology of the state. It's a little more heavy into that. Ecology, and then I'll get into the rural native plants, kind of tie into that, as well as specific environmental problems that kind of everyone's facing. So that's the gist of it.
Nice. Tuesday, April 16th. And then a couple days later, Brook Green Spring Plant Sale.
It won't be at the Winyah Auditorium. But
Oh my, yeah, oops, my bad. Yeah. Great, Yeah, someone did a bad job on this, and it starts at 9.
9:30, the gates open and recommended you get there at 9:30, get the best selections, popular event. There'll be native plants, edibles, annuals, perennials, woodies, plenty of good stuff. Hopefully native plant side will be managed able to.
Yeah, if we get some new recruits to maybe help us table. Okay, cool. And then if you don't get your fill of plants then, which there's always room for more plants, we'll have our native plant sale, May 4th. Same place, Conway, Town Green. Anything else?
Members from 9 to 9:30, open to the public 9:30 to 1. And we have 9 vendors this year for this season. So excited.
Yeah, bigger and better. Save the date. Okay, so we won't see you here until May 16th, but hopefully we'll see you out and about at one of our field trips, at a plant sale, at a lecture, all of these great things going on. Yeah. So does anyone have any updates for us? Any events you'd like to promote? Yes.
I have one that didn't make it into the PowerPoint.
Oh, no.
Which is my fault. Our April field trip will be to Cartwheel Bay Heritage Preserve, which is out towards like Aner, basically. Nichols. And it's gonna be led by Sudie Thomas and Tierney. And it's a really cool property. Let's see, the registration for that is gonna open tomorrow. If you are a member, you will get first dibs on registration. So keep an eye out for an email to register for that tomorrow morning. And if you are not a member, you can become one tonight so you can sign up for this field trip. It's a little bit of a drive away, but it's a really cool property. It's got, I know the dwarf witch hazel is like one of the big draws, a pretty rare plant. Some other highlights.
We're hoping to see dwarf azalea, Carolina, laurel, horse sugar should be blooming. Hopefully the poplar willow will still be blooming. And a whole slew of others.
Yeah. So keep an eye out for that field trip, and I'll give you a save the date for another one that Erin is helping us to plan on May 11th, right?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. We'll be planning a field trip to the Black River Cypress Preserve, which is out in Andrews. It's a really amazing property with a lot of floodplain of the Black River, so cypress swamp, some really cool uplands. That one we don't have registration for just yet, but you can save the date for May 11th if you are interested. Cool.
Yeah. And keep an eye out on our newsletter, which we're going about one or two a month. So that'll have all the details, and our new Facebook page, which we'll be posting more frequently. If you are a Facebook poster and would like to help us post things on Facebook, let us know. We'd love to have more help. But yeah, that's all we got so far. I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I'm Justin Miller, director at Anderson Oaks Assisted Living. We are kicking off again. I think it's gonna be our 8th. Sudie Dave's art show, May 16th. So unfortunately, I will not be here for the next meeting. But on that night, it's we're partnering with the Conway Chamber. They say there's gonna be about 70 people there. It's not open to the public, it's specifically a chamber event. But I'm looking for possibly some representation from us to maybe have a little table or an area to give out information about the chapter. The Sudie Dave's art show, Sudie Dave's was a resident of ours, and actually this Sudie Thomas's mom, and she would do art of Venus flytraps and pitcher plants and native plants. And so we have it all over our community. And so I think it'd be a great kind of pairing, wanting to see if Trapper will maybe have some representation. So I don't know if anyone's interested in getting involved with that, but it'd be great. I know it's the same night as the meeting, but it'd be great to have someone there. I don't know who would do that.
Yeah, if you wanna just email, like Grand Strand @SCNPS.org. Sure. We will, run it by our board and our education committee, or anyone that's interested in learning how to table.
Okay.
And we'll try to see if someone's available. Yeah.
I appreciate it.
That's awesome. Thanks, Justin. Who else? Kara?
Yeah, I should have mentioned this during the Walk 'em All Week thing, but we do a student science poster and art contest with our Walk 'em All Week event. And we got 229 entries this year,
Mhm.
which is outstanding. Like normally we get like anywhere between like 30 to 100. So 229 is a big deal. We would love for you all to get to see them, and they are going to be on display at the Horry County Museum. We just installed them today. They will be up through the 28th. The 28th, they're closed the 29th through like the 1st, so kind of. But anyways, go check them out and you can vote for your favorite. There will be a People's Choice Award. We got some really amazing stuff, like stuff from little kids that are just adorable, and then stuff from middle and high schoolers that is just incredible. So I highly recommend checking it out. If you can't make it to the Horry County Museum, we will be posting it on Facebook, and we can link through the South Carolina Native Plant Society Facebook to the album. And you can vote there for your favorites too, just by liking them.
Mhm.
But they're really good, guys. Check them out.
And all about native plants.
Yes, the leaves grow in the flow, so the ones that aren't about plants don't like them.
You're not on there.
They are not on.
Does anybody have updates on the DNR purchase of the CMC and hospital property yet?
It hasn't gone through. We're
Still working on it.
Okay.
So no, not yet.
May 18th is if you want to come to inland from the Grand Strand to the bustling metropolis of Lake City.
Mhm.
We'll be having our market in May, which is our big plant sale. Plenty of natives, some pretty funky stuff, funky natives, not too common.
Okay.
The proceeds from the plant sale are definitely gonna go to a good cause as well, so we donate the proceeds.
Mhm.
So.
Cool.
I'll
May
send-
18th.
May 18th, I'll send you all some more information.
All right. Wow. Plants on plants on plants. We love it. Anyone else? And you can always do email us. If we don't know the answer, we'll find it or try to find it. But we're an open book and we want to hear your suggestions because this is our chapter. So whatever we want to do, we can probably do it within reason. So, all right, that's all I got. We encourage you to mingle, talk to people, talk about plants, or just go home. But if you want to learn about how to table with us, because we do need some help, we're gonna meet up here with our box of tabling supplies and our posters, and we can just give you the rundown of that. It's not rocket science, but yeah, okay. That's all I got.
And also, look at IPA, this might easily be mistaken for St. Patrick's Day cupcakes. But of course.
Thank you all.
Wood sorrel, salad. These are actually South Carolina Native Plant Society cupcakes. So, please, I know, isn't that a genius? That is. Please eat them down, because otherwise you'll be forcing me to drag them in outdoor, indoor movie night.